Yes, welcome everybody to our today's meeting. The meeting will be held in English because we have a special guest, Rune Christensen from MakerDAO, who is the CEO of this artistic project. It was a project probably 2 years ago, but now it's the leading company that provides very nice let's say tool, and Rune will talk about it. So for those who don't know me, my name is I'm blockchain strategy lead in Alior Bank, responsible for blockchain implementation in Alior. So, Rune, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Rune Christensen. I'm CEO of Maker. Been into Bitcoin since the very early days, and nowadays it's like Maker has it's recently people starting saying things like it's the biggest decentralized application. It's the only decentralized application that has achieved adoption. A lot of other really interesting stuff, like really exciting for us, obviously. And so this talk, or these slides I prepared, this presentation I prepared, is like a really standard type of presentation. As you can see, it starts with what is blockchain, which I think you all know probably. So I won't really go in on that much, but my goal is just that we have kind of like conversation, interactive, figure out what people actually want to talk about, and yeah. I mean, it's really interesting that nowadays we hear, for instance, in a bank, right, or like with a bank blockchain community, which is something that's only really starting to happen to us in the last 6 months or so. You know, finally, we're probably penetrating in all the right places in terms of how the financial world is coming together with the blockchain world, and I think that's really exciting because, and this is also what you'll see, it's all about, for us, it's really about how do we make blockchain real into something that actually does something in the real world, right? So so what is a blockchain? I think it's a good way to a good metaphor for it, right? That really it's just a ledger. So it's really like the most ancient technology that's just been slightly updated for the modern world. And from our perspective in Maker, this is one of the main things we think that the blockchain gives, right? And probably transparency is like the really, like the one that's really a big deal. Very often, like very obvious why transparency is so great, especially kind of like really verifiable transparency, right? Like that new kind of promise that there's no way you can cheat. You know, you can the Bitcoin's out there or something like that, right? Which is really a big deal when you think about the financial crisis or just fraud, whatever, Enron. I mean, all these cases that in general make people, just feel skeptical, right, about how the whole financial system even fits together and sort of how, whether we can even trust each other in society. And then with the blockchain, we can turn all that around, and most importantly, achieve this shared infrastructure and sort of sharing of everything we do in a new way where people just have more trust and more interconnection. And as a result, everything can get improved. Especially the really big problems in the world, right? Which is what it's really exciting about blockchain and sort of how it really applies so well to a lot of the places that in the past have sort of been neglected by technological development. And also just financial development. What's so interesting is how, the blockchain really kind of works in the opposite way compared to how a lot of other things that work here, where really the really great advantage goes to those who didn't really benefit that much from the internet, for instance. And I think one of a big reason for this is just the fundamentals of open source nature of blockchain and the fundamental ease of access and ease of use, which means it's just can be really easy to deploy systems and make things available to like in places where you wouldn't be able to, you know, set up a major sort of online banking infrastructure or something like that, that currently is necessary to provide sort of modern financial access. And yeah, and here's some fun examples of what's wrong with the financial infrastructure currently, right? And inflation, of course, is a really, really hot topic, both in like, I mean, that's Venezuela right now, which is completely having a great time, but also there's Argentina, which is a country sort of on the edge, which is actually one of the main places we're focusing on. Right? Argentina is like just such an obvious fit for what we're doing. So now let's talk a little about what we're doing at Maker. Yeah, we like economic empowerment and quality and financial inclusion, but also we like stability. And that's what the sort of the main thing we're known for, is that we made the first decentralized stablecoin on Ethereum. And this is some actual graphs. Oh yeah, this is a long one actually. So this is our greatest, proudest achievement, where you can see here how this is the top of the ICO bubble, where Ethereum was in like what, 1,000 something, 200. I can't actually even remember now. It's that far away from what the reality in crypto is today, right? Where everything has crashed totally to the bottom, 20x loss for everyone. But yet the Dai stablecoin, which is our main product and the first decentralized stablecoin on Ethereum, and one of the first, one of the only currencies other than Bitcoin and Ethereum to gain some adoption, was able to remain stable throughout all this. And yeah, so and the point which I'd like to make a lot is that no one's going to accept or adopt blockchain or really any technology if you force some really, really terrible user experience or drawback on them, right? Such as the volatility of Bitcoin, which is why we saw a lot of shops starting accepting Bitcoin, and then they stopped doing it again later, because no one's going to use, like, you don't use a currency if it has a huge drawback. You don't use the technology if there's some sort of big switching cost to some sort of foreign thing you have to accept. Rather, the only way you can get technology adopted if it already makes it, like, it's already easier than what you already have, and everything is better, and so everything is better in every way, right? Then finally people will consider switching to something new. So in a way, it's like this, like, so this quote, for instance, I just think in terms of our philosophy of what it takes to get blockchain adopted. Like what's funny is that this is, like, so here we have Tradeship, which is one of the key partners, and they're talking about how, you know, volatility is unacceptable and so on. And what's funny is that's still only the first step, right? Like now you remove the thing that's unacceptable. That still doesn't mean that people are even going to adopt it, just because now there's no longer like a red line. And that's also, I mean, that's still the big problem that needs to be solved, right? How to really make those great benefits that's going to make real companies and the real world probably adopt blockchain. So a little bit more on how that works. And by the way, now I think I'm going to slow down a little bit. So if any of you have some questions or comments or something, or if it gets too complicated, because first of all, the Dai, I'll explain now, right? But the Dai itself is really simple, right? It's a stablecoin, which means it's a cryptocurrency with price stability. One Dai is $1. You can send it like a Bitcoin. You can hold it in your wallet. You use it like money, and you don't need to know how it works to use it. You can just use it. You can it's actually the only cryptocurrency I think you can use straight out of your browser. Like, so if you don't even have a Bitcoin wallet or a crypto wallet, you can go to xdai.io and you can actually send and receive it immediately, which is fun. That someone actually made that. So yeah, so it's really easy to have it use as just its basic thing, which is just the basic product, the stablecoin. And then the question of how it keeps that stability gets a slightly deeper topic. But the very basic gist of it is, as it says here, right? It's backed by assets. So it's kind of like the gold standard in the way that you don't trust that Dai is stable because you just think it's great and it's stable and like that, right? Like it's not about like the team or the technology or some algorithm or something. It's about the fact that there are real assets that you can check are there, because it's blockchain, so you can actually see them on the blockchain. And then what you really trust is the value of the real assets that are backing it. And that's sort of how you can trust that your money has value. Just like, you know, the reason why money had value during the gold standard was because the actual trust was in the gold itself. So this is what the blockchain gold standard thing machine looks like. So it's and yeah, it's actually it's also like banking, right? That's another thing to compare it to. It's basically on one hand, like you have the stable coins that are in the system. They're kind of in circulation. People use them all the time. Startups use them to pay salaries, especially international salaries, and a lot of like Ethereum projects and the Ethereum Foundation, for instance, they pay some of that payroll in Dai because it's really convenient. Just send someone, you know, their monthly salary in dollars over the internet without volatility. And all the other use cases, I mean, the remittance, savings, and Argentina, right, escaping inflation. And then on the other hand of that, so on the opposite side of the currency use case, and so the stability use case, there's the credit use case, and there's the credit market that enables the stability to exist in the first place. And this is really like the other side of the bank's balance sheet in a way, right? So where the Dai stablecoin is it's the deposits in the bank, kind of like the liabilities of the bank, right? The collateral and the assets that are backing the stablecoin are kind of like the assets in the bank, right? And the other side of the balance sheet, right? And just like how most money created by banks is backed by by real estate, right? By mortgages, but also a bunch of other stuff. Dai is backed similarly by giving out loans based on collateral, right? Not just giving out. I mean, there's a whole thing about uncollateralized and collateralized loans, but really from a perspective of Maker, it can support any type of loan and really does consider any type of loan collateral, even if it's in theory, like even if you would call it unsecured, for instance, in traditional finance. So, so it's really about giving access to credit based on your assets or based on your data or anything. So it's very, very generalized. And then the key sort of aspect of the system that both allows it to be decentralized, so it allows it to do all this stuff without, you know, being like controlled by a company or like a team or some expert or a central bank or whatever. It really runs by itself and actually even can't be shut down, which is one of the really interesting characteristics of it, of course. And all of this is because of what's known as the MKR holders, so the governors of the system, which is a decentralized community of crypto enthusiasts or like financial nerds typically, or cryptographers and mathematicians, and kind of like this very, very interesting group of people that now is numbers more than 10,000 from all over the world that are able to use a cryptocurrency called MKR to coordinate over the internet in a decentralized fashion to govern and control and regulate this system. And then this is kind of on the left here, this figure, right? You can see the basic gist of the sort of the logic of the collateralized lending and the stability and the underlying idea of the system, right? On one hand, on the right hand here, you have the this is sort of the where you've taken some collateral and you've generated some amount of Dai with it. So this the Dai portion can be considered the amount of Dai in circulation out of this particular collateral or the debt attached to that collateral position. And it's actually a single person that would have taken out a loan like this, right? So you would have deposited some collateral into the system and used that to take out a loan. And then you would have had some cash, some Dai stablecoin in his wallet that you can then trade to someone else. So this is a bunch of the cool use cases that we're focusing on. And this is more on the stablecoin side, kind of like how you can use a stablecoin, how you can use digital money in the real world. And remittance is like a really obvious first use case for digital currency. And Ripple is like an example of a pretty big, like widely adopted remittance network like this, right? Although Ripple does have a number of drawbacks that Maker Dai actually solves, which is quite interesting because that's also where this whole story of synergy comes into play, right? Where there's actually what Maker is creating and what Dai is creating. Not only do we have kind of our own use cases that we already that we can pursue directly, but also there's a lot of synergy and a lot of integration that can be done with our system and all the other nascent blockchain systems out there. And there's trade finance, which is like a big deal. We have a partnership with TradeShift, which is one of the biggest supply chain platforms that we're working on. This like next generation organized blockchain powered trade finance solutions for smaller businesses and sort of you know like supplier to supplier trade finance, and this stuff that's sort of further out where you normally aren't really able to reach, but with blockchain and with more better access to data, you can actually start doing financing out there. And there's also blockchain-powered accounting systems, which is actually what I think is the most, that's going to be the really big thing in the future. Once that probably starts to catch on, that's when it's through the accounting systems of companies that the world sort of blockchainifies, and you really see that's kind of how it all comes together in my mind, a couple of decades out in the future. So so Maker really is about building on top of the blockchain and so enabling the blockchain as well, right? And playing to the strengths of blockchain technology. So this has been sort of the core goal from the beginning, right? We want to create stability. We want to fix this problem of you can't adopt blockchain if there's huge volatility and if it's like this foreign, shady, unstable thing. But at the same time, we can't compromise the actual core values of blockchain, right? Like the transparency, the resilience, the decentralization, the equality, and sort of the also like the efficiency and directness of it. So Maker has really been designed, and so it's really the whole concept around it is around this like extreme, like really taking these things to the extreme and sort of making them as best as you possibly can, and never compromising on something like, let's say, short-term like profitability or something, or like short-term, like monetization or anything like that, but more like actually being really focusing more on how blockchain is this goal of bringing everyone together in shared systems, and then through sheer scale, creating massive value, and then passing on most of that to the end user, and as a result, creating this like very virtuous and kind of very positive interaction between everyone. So that's also why we focus so much on partnerships and sort of partnering up with other projects in the blockchain space and bringing all the cool blockchain projects together. Because, as we all know, there's actually a lot of not so good stuff out there in the blockchain world. So we really try hard to kind of find the good ones and empowering them and connecting them with us and our system and what we have to offer, but also what they have to offer each other. And also we've increasingly started to like bring in some of the real world into the blockchain bubble, right? Including TradeShift, for instance, this is one of our big enterprise partners. But also, for instance, like Andreessen Horowitz, right? This the big investor started getting into crypto with us and kind of started seeing that okay, there are some real projects and some real value and assets in here. Any questions or any specific thing you want to talk about? Otherwise, I can talk a little bit about this department. But I think it's more fun if we if we yeah, we try to make it a little bit more chill and just some Q&A and that kind of stuff. If anyone has something. Oh yeah, you got it. Hello.
Right, hello. I have only one question because you told us that the stable coins are correlated with dollar. So how you can reduce counterpart risk in this connection? Because the stable coin is actually in this sense correlated also with the value of dollar. So how you can reduce the counterpart risk by using the stable coins.
So I understand you're saying how to reduce the risk of inflation of the dollar?
Yeah, for example.
So when you say counterparty risk, you're talking about the Federal Reserve, like the risk of you counting on the Federal Reserve to stabilize the dollar? Or do you mean like counterparty risk of I just speak a little loud. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. It's better. But sorry, I just want to understand it correctly. You mean you're talking about the counterparty risk of you have some money, like you have some stable coins, and whether there's some other person you have to trust not to like run away with that money. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of solving that problem, and this is actually kind of solved with our system. Like we actually don't have that type of counterparty risk because it's a decentralized blockchain platform where it's all like it's. Of course, you can remove risk. So what we've kind of done is what's happening is we're removing counterparty risk and instead having trading it for systemic risk, I guess you can say, right? So like the whole system is kind of like. And it's all based on this thing, right? It's all based on the fact that the system is collateralized with blockchain assets, and those assets are then kind of all in a way pooled together and insured together. So if there's some of the some of the different counterparties, like some of the different sources of value, sources of collateral in the system, they fail. That doesn't directly impact the holder of the stablecoin because there is kind of this, there's basically this shared insurance across the whole system that is programmatically enforced. So it's not, there's no, as long as there's any value in there and there's some overall value available to actually back the circulating supply of the stablecoin, then as a holder of that stablecoin, you're guaranteed to your value. Like the code sort of guarantees you the value, and there's really no way to, for someone, there's no kind of owner or authority that can actually decide whether or not you get to have it or not, because they can't actually, there's no way for them to control that. The only thing that can really happen is that the code gives you the value you're entitled to, if that value is there, of course, right? And then the big risk with this kind of setup, because of course there's still risk, right, is what we call a black swan event, kind of like that there's significant crash in value across all the different assets in the system. So that's also why, so right now, the system that exists that's running today, there's kind of some stats from here. Here, so there's 72 million Dai in existence, and they are backed by 1 million ETH tokens. So that's actually nowadays it's about $230 million worth of collateral. So, but this is all in one currency. This is all Ethereum backing the Dai. So if all that Ethereum just went to zero and just totally crashed to nothing, then of course your Dai is worthless, right? Because it's backed by that Ethereum that's sitting in the smart contracts. So what's really important is diversification and actually spreading the risk out across many different assets rather than just Ethereum tokens.
I have another question on the top of the question which was asked right now, which is there any interface between the stable currency and fiat currencies? In a sense, because I understand that the stable coin is a soft peg to dollar, and that's obvious. But on the other hand, do you function only within the blockchain environment, or is there any possibility of getting into the fiat money? Is there any interface, or you are just leaving it to the intermediary agencies?
So I guess the answer is both yes and no, because the way there is that interface exists is through very seamless integration with intermediaries. And I'll just I have a slide for Wire, one of our key partners, one of our early partners that has really helped set up this this like seamless sort of interaction and connection between the blockchain world and the Dai that represent $1 on the blockchain. And then, like sort of the ability to send that out to, let's say, someone's bank account. So you, like, I mean, and so what they do is they provide the tools and the APIs necessary for a whole range of apps that are being built today. And I'm not sure any of them is really, like, some of this stuff that can really fully utilize this. The technology is completely live yet. But basically what it means is you can create an app where what you do is you have 100 Dai on your app, 100 stablecoins on your app, and you put in someone's bank account, let's say some American bank account, and you press send. And what happens is you send your 100 Dai to Wire, who will then buy your Dai from you and pay and sort of in payment, like the way they pay you is that they send out $100 to that bank account with a little fee, of course. And what's really cool is that we actually have a lot of these, like these on and off ramps, so these interface points with the banking systems. And we have them, so Wire is an American-based company, right? We also have a company called Ribio, which is South America and Argentina-based. And we have a number of European, even African, and Southeast Asian providers as well that are integrating. And that actually means that what you end up getting is this interconnected network, right, where you can do stuff like you can have your dollars in a bank account in the US, you can buy some Dai through Wire in the US, and you can immediately sell that Dai in Argentina through Ribio, and really actually do fully seamlessly, right, where it's just like a local bank transfer one place, then it's an instant blockchain transaction, and then a local bank transfer out in the other end, right? And that way, what happened is you managed to circumvent SWIFT, right? And that's really, like, there's a lot of people who would like to do that, including some banks we're working with, who are like very much, they can see how, if we integrate this API, suddenly it doesn't take 5 days, and we know in advance what the fees are, and we don't have this kind of like risk of it randomly getting stuck somewhere, and like a range of advantages. And also it's a very, like, when it's being set up today, it's something like what you set up is maybe one corridor or something, right? Because there's, or maybe something like America to Argentina, because we have an on and off ramp in America, and we have it in Argentina, and it's still very limited, right? Like the network is brand new. But over time, more and more of these on and off ramps are coming, right? Like saying we have Europe coming, Africa coming, Southeast Asia, and even more more in each of these places. And then it becomes this incredibly competitive marketplace for value transfer, right? Where whenever you want to move money into Dai and transfer money somewhere else, you choose the most competitive offering where you have your money, and you also choose the most competitive offering where you want to go. And you can sort of combine multiple together, so you can have a single system that can seamlessly expand and send money anywhere as the network as a whole grows, and just gain from the efficiency and network effect. And again, right, all about the blockchain synergy, right?
Question about business cases regarding financial institutions, because we are looking here in the bank, so, and there are financial institutions present as well, so I guess what I would like to hear about, if you could share what are the examples of financial institutions that use Dai and how is it used, and so on.
So, I mean, we have a lot of experiments doing a lot of different stuff, and one of the trends we've seen is that it seems like many different institutions and banks very often have like a different angle that they just like, that's a particular interest they've already had, and there's almost always some application related to our system with that, right? But I think in terms of where there's most excitement, I think it's trade finance. Trade finance is just like this really exciting thing right now, right? Like everyone is want to do it, and it's being done very much with traditional fintech. It's not really being done with blockchain yet. I mean, a lot of people are trying, but it's not. It's just the traditional solutions that are gaining traction still, right? In terms of what's the most, I mean, what we're doing that's the most real and that we know is actually going to be implemented and going to like save money and sort of actually work. Then it's the remittance I was just talking about. So basically, basically helping banks just like send money more efficiently. A little bit similar actually to how some banks also integrate with transfer wires, for instance.
Okay, but is there an example of financial institutions or banks that actually use it on production environment?
No, there is. So the best, like we have I would say a medium stage actual production. I mean something we know is gonna happen, and then a bunch of like pilots and exploratory things. But another case that's also one really cool institutional production use case is this is actually a whole other huge topic that's very related to Maker and stablecoins, but it's itself like this big thing with security tokens, which you may have already know about, which is like another buzzword, just like stablecoins, right? So tokenizing securities, tokenizing stocks, tokenizing home equity, that's something that we are really involved in because we need to use those tokens as collateral in our system, right? To like diversify the risk. So instead of just being held back by Ethereum or something else, right? It needs to be backed by a bunch of all sorts of different assets. And one of the big real world, like one of the flagship use cases of tokenization is this big apartment building in Manhattan that was tokenized. So the whole, so big, it was like a $30 million financial transaction. And it was actually partially settled in Dai. So accredited investors were actually able to like buy these tokens directly on the blockchain, kind of like an instant swap, using Dai tokens as the settlement mechanism. And they're also, and this is through one of our partners called Propeller, which recently merged with another company, and they're doing some new cool stuff. But this is something they actually already did in the real world, and that already is live right now. They also offer these tokens to actually pay out their dividends in Dai. So you can actually, and it's like mortgage-backed securities, debt instruments. So it's kind of like your regular debt payments can be paid out in Dai, so it's settled directly to your blockchain account. And then even, in the end, the whole thing can be settled, the whole principal. And that's going to be expanded a lot more. So we recently announced also, I think yesterday actually, how another real estate tokenization platform is also enabling Dai both for investment, but also on the payout settlement side of the instrument.
If you could just dig a little bit deeper into the mechanics of how all this process of stabilization goes, so we could understand how smart contracts are used and why the Dai is actually stable when the market is unstable.
Yeah. So so the fundamental stabilization mechanism of the system is, let me try and put it. I mean, the key sort of characteristic is this over-collateralization, right? So in the smart contract, in the system, like in this example, there's 185 stable coins and there's $300 worth of collateral, right? And then in in the live system right now, there is you know, the $72 million in stablecoins, and there's 1 million total ETH, so that's about, well, actually it's more than 1 million. It's actually 2 million ETH today, so this is a little bit old, but like something like $200 million worth of collateral backing that stablecoin, right? So, but of course, this is more like, I mean, this is a guarantee that there's value there, but of course, then how do you stabilize it exactly $1, right? And so the first answer to that question is what we think of as the long-term hard guarantee, right? So like like there needs to be a really sort of unambiguous guarantee that there's no way that randomly or something, right? Like you won't actually get $1 worth of value, right? Especially when the assets are there. Like if the value really is there, you know, what you really need is just a claim on that value, right? And you need to be guaranteed you're going to get a $1 worth of claim on these assets. So the way that claim is really guaranteed in the very long run, or like sort of as sort of like the worst case scenario for the system, is through a process called emergency shutdown. So what that means is that the system, and this is really what we see kind of like the most important feature of the system, and also something that's pretty cool in terms of utilization of blockchain technology when you compare it to things in the real financial world, like ETFs or like sort of financial meltdowns and this kind of stuff. In our system, because everything is accounted for and sort of tracked transparency in real time, if for whatever reason it needs to be shut down and settled, and it's like time to just let everyone get their money out, it can happen instantly, right? So instantly, all it takes is one blockchain transaction that actually initiates this emergency shutdown, and all holders of DAI that the moments before were holding a token that was worth $1, now, like, they no longer, and this is back to the gold standard thing, right? They don't need to care about that DAI token anymore. What they hold immediately after an emergency shutdown is exactly $1 worth of the collateral in the system, right? So if it was, right now it's only Ethereum, then what would happen is the system basically calculates, like, okay, so you have 100 DAI, I have a whole bunch of Ethereum collateral. It basically runs a calculation to figure out how much Ethereum do I need to give you to get your $100 worth of value, right, based on the market value of Ethereum. And then your DAI really turns into that Ethereum in a way, right? So that is kind of like the hard guarantee you have, right, where it doesn't matter when you think about the DAI. What matters is when you think about Ethereum as a valuable asset, right? And whether you think that if the system says you're going to get $100 worth of Ethereum, whether that actually sort of represents real value to you. And of course, it's like it gets a little bit more tangible if this, rather than being just a bunch of Ethereum cryptocurrency, it was like rather sort of a basket or like an index of all these various like securities and assets and tokenized all sorts of stuff, right? So we're talking about, like stocks and bonds and home equity and all of these tokenized things, but also other stuff like gold maybe. There's all these various gold tokenization projects with gold sitting in vaults all around the world. So you can have the same thing where you can have claims and that kind of stuff, and like land or those kind of things. Right? I mean, all this tokenized real world value or cryptocurrency value ultimately backs this collateral portfolio, and it's like ultimately enforced through this emergency shutdown thing. That means the worst thing that can happen again is that you get settled at $1, and that's where the long, like when we think of it as a long run guarantee of the stabilization around $1 comes from. But again, so this is only a long run guarantee. So now there's over-collateralization. That's great. There's like long run theoretical guarantee that the worst thing that can happen is you get settled. But of course, how do you deal with kind of like day-to-day liquidity, volatility, and this kind of stuff, right? And that's where the short-term stabilization comes in, which is it's relatively simple. It's interest rate adjustments. So the way DAI is stabilized in sort of the day-to-day market environment is the same way central banks stabilize the currencies, right? You change the interest rate to sort of change the demand and supply, basically, right? Because if the interest rate of an asset goes up, right? If the interest, and it's kind of on both sides, right? So we're both talking about the interest rate for holding Dai. So it's actually like in a bank savings account. You also get a savings rate, as we call it, for holding Dai over time. Although this is not implemented yet, it's coming in the next version of the system. So there's both the interest rate on the demand side, right? How attractive it is to hold Dai, and then there's also the interest rate on the supply side, right? Like what's the cost of borrowing Dai out of the system when you deposit your collateral into the system, or you tokenize your house and you put it into the system and you take a loan against that. What's the interest rate you have to pay there? And those two things then are constantly balanced out against each other. So we basically make sure that if the price is below $1, the interest rate will go up. And if the price is above $1, the interest rate will go down. And this is, of course, a lot more complicated than it sounds. And we have this whole, we have a whole scientific community, as we like to call it, built around figuring out how do you actually do that in practice. Like how do you look at the data, look at the the credibility of the data sources, and how do you sort of combine it all together to actually make intelligent decisions on whether interest rates should go up or down, stay the same, or however you do it, right? And that all goes back to the NPR holders. So this decentralized community of kind of like regulators and sort of the regulators in the system and the authority, or I guess it's wrong to call it an authority because we keep saying there is no authority in the system. I mean, they have this particular role in the system that means that they regulate and they sort of stabilize and they protect the system. And they also have very strong incentives in place to ensure they do that. Which is very simply that if they do it well, they earn money, and if they do it badly, they lose money. So then they'll obviously want to stabilize it well and avoid screwing them up and losing other people's money, because then they actually have to bail it out themselves.
Hello, two questions if I may. One question concerns ETH, which is collateral. Provided that I own a certain amount of Dai, can I freely withdraw ETH, which is collateral? For example, if I think that I no longer want to own Dai, so that I want to switch it to ETH, that's one question. Or just withdraw ETH that is collateral for it. And second question also concerns ETH. Because ETH is collateral for Dai, can you explain what would happen if value of my collateral, ETH, drops below a certain threshold? Because I imagine there is one. What should I do in order not to lose my Dai? Because as you mentioned, there is a stabilization mechanism in order for Dai to keep its value. So I meant in terms of being a stablecoin, and I imagine there's something else, also a stabilization mechanism in order to keep collateral at a desired amount. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. And actually, I'll answer the last one first. Because this is something I didn't even get to this because it shows a slightly too simple presentation, I guess. Typically it's the other way around, and people are like, "What is all this complexity?" So we try to keep.
Sorry.
No, well, I love it. I mean, this is what I like to talk about, So this is one of the. I mean, this is actually So I think it's interesting, right? Because this is maybe not like I don't really think of this necessarily as a stabilization mechanism, but really more like a resilience mechanism or something, right? Because this is not about sort of manipulating the price of Dai in the market or something. This is about like protecting the integrity of the system against insolvency, right? A typical term for what you're talking about is margin calls, right? Well, that's how a lot of mainstream people think of this situation where you have a loan and now you don't have enough collateral and it's kind of getting risky, right? What happens is, it's kind of like a margin call, except you don't actually get a call. The system is just like, you hit the risky limit, now we're going to liquidate you. So that is fully automatic and sort of on-chain, and it actually works based on a network of what we call keepers, which is really just keepers is really just what we call sort of rational automated agents operating in this marketplace. So basically, it's like arbitrage bots essentially. That what they do is they scan the blockchain and they look for loans, they look for positions that have become risky, don't have enough collateral, basically based on and the way you know whether something has enough collateral or not is based on the risk parameters. So based on these special terms, specific terms that have been set by the maker holders, right? So by the governance of the system, who actually vote directly with the token to kind of they really vote through Ethereum transactions, and then their votes together sort of create an Ethereum transaction that sort of directly alters the variable in the system, right? So it'll be some particular number, and the system then there's just a continuous calculation to see to sort of ask a question that goes something like, let's say, is there 150% value of Ethereum against the loan, for instance, right? And if there is more than that, you're totally fine. If there's less than that, someone can come and liquidate your position and just target your loan on the blockchain kind of, and then initiate liquidation. And then right now it's kind of a little slightly weird mechanism because we're in the beta, so we made something that's but anyway, it's supposed to be an auction. So it's going to be an auction in the full version of the system. Whereas right now it's this more simple thing it's not as easy to understand as an auction. But an auction, the liquidation really is just you reach your risky position, the system then, a keeper sort of notifies the system that this position is risky, time to initiate an auction. Then an auction starts, and it has some sort of preset period. It could be 6 hours, and then people bid with Dai to buy the collateral from that position, right? And then if enough Dai is bid to actually cover all the debt that this position has, that this position was backing, right? So let's say this is 100 debt, and there's $150 worth of collateral. Then once people are bidding something like, let's say, $140 in the auction, right? The system just takes the $100 that was the debt initially and just contracts that, right? Just remove that from the supply, just sort of cancel out the initial loan that was created in the first place. And then whatever's left over is just automatically given to the guy who took the loan originally. So the system sort of completely automatically runs all this. But also, again, there's no warning, there's no, it's kind of like a hash, we call it in financial infrastructure, right? So the core system that we've built is not really kind of a user-friendly consumer product. It's something for others to build safe and user-friendly and consumer-friendly user interfaces on top of that. For instance, notifies them in advance that they're about to get liquidated, or even automatically deleverages for them.
And what about the guy who owned the liquidated position? Does he stay with part of ETH, which previously was a collateral, or what? Okay.
So right. So let's say it's $150 of collateral, $100 of debt, right? And someone bids, let's say, $145 on the collateral. Because of course, in a liquidation, you want to get a good price, right? Because it's a fire sale. So the system will just take $100 for itself because he had 100 debt, and whatever is left over, it just sends it. Oh, and then you had a second question, or the first question actually, which was, can you redeem directly in real time? And actually, you cannot do that, and that's why we call it a soft pick. So there's not this there's no way where in the system that there's an absolute guarantee that, for instance, if I have 100 Dai, I can go to my bank and the bank will give me $100 or something like that. But it is actually a free market process, and you need to find someone else who's willing to buy your Dai for $100 before you can get out $100 of the system in real time. And the only exception to this is that if everyone wants to get out at the same time, in which case you can settle the whole system, you can sort of shut the whole thing down. Then you actually do get that direct recourse. You just go and really redeem $100 worth of Ethereum, for instance. But then, like I was talking about earlier, the way the reason why it still ends up being still being fine and without that direct recourse in real time during normal operation is because of the interest rates getting manipulated. So the market participants are constantly basically, like, the interest rates are constantly dynamically adjusted to ensure basically that there's just always someone, like, enough people want to borrow and enough people want to hold it, and that the supply and demand are matched evenly, basically. And of course, like I was also saying, that is a very complex thing. So actually, so right now the system is basically, like, it's a lot less stable than it will be in the future, for instance, and it's also a lot less stable and liquid than if you compare it to something like simpler stablecoin solutions like Tether, where it's really just there's a bank account with $1 million and there's 1 million tokens, and if you take one of those tokens and go to the bank account, you get $1, which is a really, really simple stablecoin model. But the problem with that model is it trades away the decentralization, right? Because it's just based around a custodian. And Maker can effectively achieve the same level of stability once it scales enough and gets enough diversified collateral, and also gets enough sort of connections into other sources of stability. Actually, in particular, those like centralized stablecoins.
So my question will be, when do you expect to achieve such stability that it could actually be widely applied by I will say financial institutions, right? Because we are here interested in actually this. And the second question would be, how would you convince the financial institution management to use DAI, and how it could be used right now? What financial institutions should do in order to use DAI to send funds.
And so in terms of what you can do right now, I think right now, at this very moment, there's one use case that actually does work, which is the remittance, and it's a part of Wire that I had on the right here. Keeps coming up with this. So a financial institution could actually right now, and many are actually doing it, or a couple maybe. A couple are actually doing this in production. Like integrating the API of Wire, which allows them to on-ramp into let's say like Wire's banks in Europe, and then off-ramp through Wire's bank in the US, and then pay a lower fee than using Swift. But this is still, of course, like the volume is not. It's like this is mostly useful for kind of like personal remittance, like small scale remittances still, because of the maturity of the system. Right? But it's still like way cheaper than any competing solution. So to answer your second question, right? I'll do your first question. But how to actually convince? Like, what is the selling point? And it's really very simple. It's like lower. Like it's actually. More than anything else, it's lower interest rates or like better interest rates. So like lower if you're borrowing and higher if you're lending. And then also just like general efficiency, speed, fees, and transparency in the sense that when you use blockchain-based systems and stablecoins and so on, right, it's kind of like, first of all, you're going to pay the lowest possible fees, like that you really can pay, sort of according to financial theory, pretty much. And you can verify that this is the case, right? You can see all the, where the fees are charged. There's like transparency into who are charging these fees and what their costs are. And there's also a competitive marketplace where they constantly compete with each other, right? And there's even this kind of like real-time insight into what's happening when you're using it, right? So that also has a lot of benefits in terms of compliance, which is another whole area where the blockchain provides a lot of value, right? In terms of this more real-time, more solid view of what's going on and better and more guaranteed access to data. But the interest rates are really like when things get really interesting, because it's really just about I mean, it's really a marketplace where borrowers and lenders are directly connected, right? So, you know, one of the like the typical use cases that I mean we have financial institutions looking at is this home equity tokenization I was talking about already, right? Where you have these like first of all you create these tokens that represent mortgage-backed securities or something like that, which by itself is interesting because now they're more liquid and they're more like they have the transparency, compliance advantages. But also they are compatible with Maker itself, right? They're compatible as collateral into the Maker system to back the Dai stablecoin. And that means you now can borrow capital directly from the Dai holders, right? Because basically there's that balancing of interest rates, right? So when there's not enough, or when there's too many Dai holders, right? When there's a lot of people who there's a lot of demand for Dai, let's say there's a lot of people in Argentina who want to escape hyperinflation, or there's a lot of demand for remittance around the world, that results in overall interest rates of the system going down, right? Because then you actually need more creation of more Dai, basically. And so that just means that the system lowers its interest rates, and then the amount of like the cost of capital when you want to leverage, when you want to do we really think you can kind of think of it as a repo deal, right? Like kind of like a sort of really like large scale repo desk type service that just is fully automated. You can just go straight with your tokens and you can get it's instant, it's incredibly low cost, right? It's like the lowest possible fee in terms of the cost of capital comes directly from the people who hold currency in the system, and then there's kind of like the risk premium, which is applied to your loan based on this completely open scientific formula, as we like to say, right? It means it's this like open process with open source models where you know exactly how the pricing is arrived at. And it's ultimately the whole sort of goal of how the system is built is that the pricing has to be as fair as possible and sort of as user-friendly as possible, right? So that rather than going for kind of like creating a platform where you can then like get a nice fee and a nice spread and all this stuff, it's actually the opposite. It's like, let's try to really keep the costs as low as possible and then just encourage mass adoption.
And what about because the Dai actually interacts with cryptocurrency that is Ether, right? And many financial institutions, they don't want to interact right now with any cryptocurrency. So, would you see any possibility for these companies to use Dai right now, or they should wait for the market actually for the Dai to be, as you said, more backed by other assets that they actually can accept as a collateral.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess the adoption of sort of the integration cycle of a blockchain solution, of course, takes a very long time. So I think anyone who, and I mean, this is happening already, right? Like all the smart financial institutions, especially kind of like the financial centers around the world, are actually looking at kind of like how, they're not looking only at Maker, of course, but they're looking at kind of the whole decentralized finance ecosystem. Maker just happens to kind of be like the 5-ton blue whale in that ecosystem, right? But at this stage, people are starting to look at, because you kind of know what the next generation, once we get the real world assets properly tokenized, what that looks like. And people already now kind of planning, okay, how do I integrate that in a way that's kind of like very, relatively, because the key is, of course, not to try to like make it integrated kind of at the core, right? It's more like find some little use case at the edge where you can get some small efficiency by, let's say, for instance, offloading some securities from your balance sheet and doing repo deals that are have better rates than the other kind of parties you can use or something like that. But yeah, in terms of when it can even possibly consider ready for use by this institution. It's not until number one, the multi-collateral system, so the full release of the system is done, which is coming very soon, and we've been working on it for 4 years, so I'm really happy. I mean, I've been saying it's coming soon for like a year now, but now it's really like at the QA final stage, and it's pretty amazing to finally see it almost coming out and becoming a reality in the real world. But then the second thing is, what's really needed is support from a regulator, right? Like some regulator in some jurisdiction needs to actually be kind of like saying, here's a point where there's kind of like a zone. We like to call it walled garden, right? Here's a walled garden where under sort of our jurisdiction we allow the maker system, the decentralized maker system, on one hand to interact with real assets that we regulate on the other hand, and we have this kind of like almost like a controlled environment where these two things can meet in a way that's fully, regulated, compliant, all of this stuff, right? I mean, consumer protection, all these things, right?
Okay, so do you think that in the future those assets will crowd out Ethereum as a collateral, so that I will be more backed by other assets that Ethereum actually?
Yeah, I think that'll happen on one hand, I think that'll happen very quickly. It will have to, because the whole point of risk management is don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So you're not gonna want a currency that's like mostly backed by, really anything, right? But especially not a cryptocurrency. So that's one. I mean, on one hand, and also just because Ethereum is pretty small when you think of it as an asset class, right? Whereas mortgage-backed securities or whatever, right? Like any standard security or financial instrument you think of, is just like so much bigger than the cryptocurrency space, right? So it's natural that this will be most of the collateral very quickly. At the same time, though, that's also going to drive sort of a big increase in the value of Ethereum, I think, right? That once you really start getting a lot of these financial interactions actually happening on the blockchain, just like increasingly, I think we will see Ethereum becoming, just like Bitcoin and Ethereum are pretty much at the same level at this point, right? But like how they're increasingly being seen as this kind of like a new asset class, it does have some interesting properties to it, right? It's fully decentralized and so on. So I still think that Ethereum will be sort of an interesting and important part of the collateral portfolio. But definitely, it's not going to be like the majority. And in general, the whole goal is to avoid having any type of asset being like really present risks to the system, right? But rather have all the risk hedged against each other.
Just intervene on that about the collateral. Could you explain about the fact, because I understand right now it's also backed on Ethereum, and the future will be a multi-collateral system. Who and how decides the composition of the collateral? How does that system work on your side? And why Ethereum now and not some other cryptocurrency? Who made that decision and how that was shaped?
So let me explain to the theoretical. So the theoretical answer, so the long-run answer of how this is decided, is through this MKR token. That was one of my early slides. So it's kind of like the maker itself, the MKR token, the MakerDAO. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So it's basically a group of people, something like between 10,000 and 20,000 currently, that hold this MKR asset. And MKR is the governance token of the system. Right? So holding this asset gives them the right to govern and regulate the system by directly voting on what we call the risk parameters, which are some of the terms and the sort of the business logic that decides like what kind of collateral, how much over collateralization, what's the interest rate, what's the sort of terms for the auction, like every single sort of parameter related to the risk of the system, the composition, and basically all this stuff is decided entirely by this decentralized community through direct on-chain votes. And then, it's like how that system is actually implemented on the blockchain, and with the technology is like, yeah, I mean, there's a long discussion can be had about how this is even built from the technological point of view, because there's all these considerations like how do you prevent abuse when it's anyone can hold this, right? It's a cryptocurrency, and how do you prevent like attacks and all this stuff. And in the end, there's like protections in place to basically ensure that even though the system is regulated and controlled and really directly like, there's really this direct control from a decentralized community, right? So it's really people all over the world holding this token that set these terms. That doesn't mean that suddenly it can like go bottom, like upside down, or the whole thing can wipe out because they decide to do something bad or something. Like there are important protections in place, and actually the most important one is this emergency shutdown I talked about earlier, right? That like the worst thing that can ever happen to you is that you get settled at what you're entitled to in your collateral. And then, I mean, how do they then actually like coordinate on what decisions to make, right? Like how do you, so something like, so now we have Ethereum. Well, what's the process of kind of like adding more collateral types to the system, right? This is actually just, this question, well, depending on your perspective, this question is more complicated than how to technically implement even a secure solution for just having them able to control this in the first place. But now you also have to kind of like scientifically and socially, coordinate on what the answer even is for what terms you want to give to other loans, right? And the number one kind of like approach, and so the rock that everything holds onto and that we really believe can make this a reality and can actually grow this system into like a global financial platform. So is that it's all about applying the scientific approach, right? Like, it's kind of like like the scientific process as we see it in real, like in whatever medicine or well anything, right? Like where it's like it's about data, it's about models, it's about kind of like rational discourse, right? And it's about giving a voice to everyone, but also at the same time not like not giving it, at the same time making sure that the stuff that's being done makes sense and that the experts actually make the decisions, right? And you don't have like stupid people who somehow have leverage, power, or something, or even biased actors come in and influence this in some way. So all this together really is like means that what we're doing is we're building on the existing theoretical frameworks in risk management already, and it's actually really exciting that what's happening now is we're getting a lot of momentum with like the traditional risk space, right? Like the top risk professionals in the world. On this day, now Maker is no longer so obscure that like it's reaching the point where they can hear about it and be like, oh, it's a blockchain. But there's some interesting risk problems here that I can like dive into in terms of like how do you make the perfect collateral portfolio? How do you like hedge the risk of a tokenized security in the US versus a tokenized security in Singapore, and how should you balance those two against each other versus also cryptocurrency, and how do you what are all these like variables, the political variables or whatever political factors to take into account, and all of these like crazy, massive, holistic question that this community and this scientific community really, right, like constantly tries to answer. And again, the goal is to have this open process, everyone contributes and so on. So there's this like fundamental spirit of unlike how my impression of how it sort of works in the like how risk is kind of thought of in the traditional financial world, is often kind of like the risk models and so on are often seen as actually as like trade secrets, right? And kind of like how we manage our risk. We don't want to share that with other people because that's kind of our advantage, right? So I think there's a lot to be gained by instead having this kind of like open approach, where it's like how do we come together and how do we collectively manage our risk together, right? Because of course, risk as a general question is of course like there's no kind of like it's all systemic in the end, right? And just one really key point to why all this, like what makes all this go around and makes all this go sense is the fundamental economic incentives of the MKR holders and of the MKR token. So kind of like the token economics, as some people like to call it, right? Like the design of the MKR token itself. So you use it to vote with, you use it for governance and so on. But that's of course not why Andreessen Horowitz bought $15 million worth of this token. That's because if you vote with it and if you regulate it, if you have this harmonious scientific community and the question of risk is solved on some holistic level or whatever, so the system is able to run stable and maintain itself, then there is a cash flow generated on the system, right? Because there's an interest rate, there's a risk premium charged basically, both as payment for insurance, but also just as literally a fee for actually regulating and managing the system, right? So when things go well in the system, there's constantly this cash flow generated from people borrowing money from the system, and that cash flow goes to doing what we call buy and burn of the MKR token. So the MKR token is autonomously bought up with the cash flow earned by the system, and then destroyed. So the total supply of the MKR token goes down over time. And today, something like, there's 1 million of those tokens, and today something like 1,000 of them have been burned so far. So there has been like the slow reduction in supply, and this of course creates more scarcity and higher price and so on, and drives the whole desire for people to buy the token and get involved in the system and kind of like helping to regulate and control it to ensure that it grows and can generate even more value for the community. But there's also a flip side to this. The fact that in good times you get to earn an income from the system, and you get to see your tokens become more scarce because they're bought and burned by the system, right? And that is if you screw up. So if you set the risk parameters wrong, and you allow some bad collateral into the system, or you allow whatever a particular portion of the collateral portfolio to become too big, and so there's just like mismanagement of risk in the system, so which eventually results in insolvency, right, in under collateralization. So you actually end up with loans in the system where you have some collateral and you have some debt, and the collateral just isn't enough to cover the debt. So the system does this auction I was talking about earlier, right? A liquidation auction. It like says, who wants to buy my pile of Ethereum? I need this pile of Ethereum to pay back $200 worth of debt, and no one is even bidding $200, right? Then you have a problem. Then you have insolvency, right? Then you have maybe you'll raise nothing, right? So now you have $200 worth of sort of empty debt, so just like $200 of insolvency in your system and pay back. And that's where one of the most important sort of features of the system kicks in, which is MKR inflation, right? So this MKR token is burnt in good times, right, and supply goes down, and in bad times, at the moment there's bad debt in the system, which you always know instantly in the system, right? This is like real time accounted. The system just immediately starts printing MKR tokens. It's like, I need $200. I'm just gonna create MKR tokens out of nothing and sell them on the market until I recapitalize. And there's no limit to that. So as an MKR holder, you have this also incredible risk of, if you screw up enough, you're gonna lose all your entire MKR investment can disappear, right? Because it is really like an insurance on the whole system. So there's this very strong, carrot in terms of when things go well, you earn money, and also stick in terms of when you screw up, you take the hit yourself, right? So it's really like put your money where your mouth is, like also relax the regulator is the insurer, right? And it's kind of like if the financial crisis was bailed out by, the central banks and the big banks, and kind of like the actual people who messed up had to actually pay for it directly instead of it being someone else.
I've got two questions actually. One is, could you elaborate more on those partnerships? You mentioned some, but maybe there are some more. And second question is, what is the future of Maker? Like you mentioned that soon there will be multi-collateral Dai, but what will happen next? Like what will happen with Maker in 1 or 2 years?
mean, so we had more than, I heard the latest data the other day. I believe it's like 100 live integrations, so like 100 systems that are right now in production, running and using Dai in some way, and then about 100, I think maybe like 70 that are in the pipeline for like integration, late stage, getting actually built out, and then maybe another 100 or so that are in the planning stage, kind of where we decided let's try to build something. Right? And of course, the vast majority of these are like very small projects that are all about like, you know, it's like some crypto wallet or something integrating Dai, or it's a oh yeah, recently there's this startup in Texas that allow you to pay for electricity in real time over a blockchain system using Dai. So and then they like disintermediate the power brokers and blah blah. There's a whole bunch of bureaucracy there, of course, that you can just totally disintermediate with blockchain, and you can also disintermediate a lot of the payment infrastructure, and then in the end, the product they end up with is just cheaper electricity. I don't think the users even know that they're using Dai actually. So it's actually, it likely uses some sort of bank settlement. I mean, ultimately you actually settle through the banking system, but then just the real time and kind of like the metering is settled in Dai on the blockchain. So that's the vast, like, I mean, that's the majority of the partnerships, right? At least kind of like startup projects, a lot of grassroots, interesting stuff. But then there's also this from the more big in like enterprise stuff, like this big partnership pilot project we're doing with Tradeshift, where what we want to do is we want to tokenize invoices basically, and tokenize like a trade finance marketplace, so that we can. I mean, mainly so we can make trade finance better for the small business, right? Because that's the goal, of course. Because the small business right now, they have all the trade finance problems, right? They need, you know, they make a sale and then they have to wait 3 months before they get paid. They still have to pay the salaries, they still have to get new materials and so on. And when they go and get financing and they're like, hey, I'm getting this money in 3 months, can I get some financing now? Can I get some trade finance right now? Then a lot of the traditional systems is not just like, I mean, because of the way finance works in today, right? Then because of the lack of options and because sort of a lot of this stuff is very sort of, you know, like platform capture and all that stuff, you typically get really, really terrible interest rates as a small business, because the lender will be like, oh yeah, you can borrow from me at this interest rate, or you can do nothing and go under because you can't pay your salaries, right? So there's a lot of opportunity here to kind of like open up, make things more accessible and more open and decentralized and all of this good blockchain stuff. And then just give, like, sort of turn it around, right? So the products actually exist for the sake of the user rather than for the sake of really like making money off the user, right? And then this is one of our, like one of the designs we've scoped in partnership with Tradeshift. And we've actually built this. We actually have the blockchain infrastructure for this, and we've even run like a bunch of like demos and kind of like various like user tests and stuff with this. And what happens actually, and this is kind of like this is a recurring trend in everything we do, is eventually we get to the stage where we're like, okay, the only problem we have now is regulation. So now we have to like figure out how to explain this to a regulator and like put it into a box and so on. And actually what ended up happening is we're not actually implementing this, we're implementing something else because we figured out we can simplify it and make it a little bit less blockchain powered, but then get it done in a way that's so much easier to sort of do as the first test run with the regulator, right? But I still think this design here is really cool because it just represents sort of the fundamental way that we think that blockchain integration needs to be done, and that is that you kind of like, so the point is at the bottom you got all the advanced blockchain stuff, you got tokenization, you got on-chain marketplace, you have you know, like blockchain powered KYC and compliance and so on. So basically we have all kind of like the blockchain good stuff at the bottom, the efficiency, all this, and then what you use is as kind of like the engine room, right? It's like where the machinery is, and when you then want the user to get the benefit from this, you make sure you hide it away, right? So it's just they just drive the car, they don't sit in the engine or anything, right? And in the context of blockchain and Dai, that means through these fiat on and off ramps, right? So the small businesses that take advantage of these kind of this trade finance solution, right, where ultimately what happens is they have a dashboard where they have the invoices on the treasury platform. Then they they have an outstanding invoice. They just have access to a button. They click that button. What then happens is the invoice is turned into a token. That token is sold off to an investor. They invest for Dai in this automated blockchain marketplace. The Dai is then converted into your local, the local currency of the small business and sent straight to the bank account. And they don't, but they don't know that part, right? They just know I click this button, I get money to my bank account. And that's kind of the level of, that's what a blockchain solution needs to look like. It's kind of like click button, get money type stuff, right? Because then you can get people to actually adopt it in the real world, but you can also get all the efficiency gains and so on, right? Because the difference from between the blockchain powered solution and then a more traditional solution is the interest rate of the blockchain powered solution is going to be whatever, incredibly low, right? I mean, it's going to approach the actual risk that is represented by this transaction. Whereas in the real world, the prices tend towards, kind of like the market rate of how much can we get out of these people. So once we can get this kind of solutions where it's as easy as it was before, it's just cheaper, and we can just deploy them all over the place in the real world, that's when I think things will really accelerate. Because then at some point, users will start to just demand the actual price, right? There'll become a point where businesses and users will just be like, we don't accept anymore that you kind of hide away the fees and you kind of segregate us away from the network effects and so on. Because now we have alternatives, and there'll always be this a cultural thing, right? That you just will not accept from your service providers, that they price gouge you, right? And you'll be like this. I mean, it's not just an economics thing, right? It's like a social thing that when the choice is there to not get, predatorily priced or whatever, right? Then there'll really be some inflection point where everyone just be like, okay, we're just gonna blockchainify. I mean, why shouldn't we, right?
Okay, so we have to finish slowly. So, if there are any questions from people who are with us online, so this is the time. So just let us know if you would like to ask anything. I can't say anything. So, my last question. So, did you think about building your own blockchain instead of using Ethereum?
We definitely thought about that, but actually, what we think is more important than that is, and this is something we, so we have this general. I mean, it's always been a general concept for us that the future is not that there's going to be one blockchain, or even that there could be, because there's different, because all the blockchains are different, and there's different trade-offs and different designs depending on your use case, right? There's kind of on one hand, there's Ethereum or something like that, that's kind of super decentralized, resilient, robust, and then there's something like Quorum, like centralized bank-created private blockchains, for instance, right? And there's really a spectrum in between as well, where it's more or less decentralization, more or less performance, for instance, but also things like data and tracking and privacy and all these. So there's so many different options, and there's not a one solution that fits everyone. So from the perspective of a blockchain application, the goal is really to just transcend all of that, I like to say, right? I mean, it's really about just not being locked down to this one blockchain, but rather actually be available on every blockchain and really everywhere, in whatever form a user wants to access this from sort of the technical perspective, they should be able to. And I think it's a little bit like the same logic of also, you don't want to show the blockchain guts, you want to show like a finished thing that's easy to use. In the same way, you don't want to like force people who want to integrate your technology to do it in some specific way, rather you want to get it to where what they want to use. Right? So my point is that basically our goal is that Maker will be available in every single blockchain. So we really see it as like, and basically it's possible. So it's possible to build a system that is connected across all the blockchains, but it's still one system. So if you use it on Ethereum, you're kind of like natively interacting with the system. But if you use it on some other blockchain, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, there's EOS, I don't know if you know that one, or Tesla. So there's a bunch of other blockchains anyway. I mean, Ethereum, of course, is most well known, right? But there's all these other blockchains, or even like Quorum, right? Like so, like a centralized blockchain. Maker really through like the governance. So the NPR holders, the governance community of Maker can decide where where the system wants to sort of expand to, and then it of course takes a technical setup to actually get this done in the real world, like get it actually implemented. But ultimately, you can create it, and you can have a single system that's available everywhere. And this is what we think is the only kind of way to actually compete. Like, if you don't build your application in this way, so it's available in every blockchain, you will never get as strong a network effect and as good economies of scale as someone who does. Right? So basically, that's our approach. Right.
Hey guys, thank you very much for coming today, and thank you, Rune, for visiting us. I hope you learned something interesting today, and see you again on the 27th of February. Our guests will come especially to us from London, and will be speaking about Corda blockchain. So this will be some kind of, I would say, small conference happening. So everybody's very welcome. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.